So the gist of this is, number one, because the norms have changed, we really, and even before the norms changed, we really needed to do a better job of looking at that adverse impact and the need for specialized services. So when we're looking at the three prongs, I think we're excellent at prong one, do they have a disability? But it's the prong 2 and 3 that we really need to beef up, especially with the norms being what they are now. So again, this also goes back to the SLP companion document, which is very much based on the Virginia. So this is where this comes from. So this is sort of where I'm going to start explaining it. Oh, wait. Did I hit record? Sorry. No, I did. Okay. Okay. So essentially what's going to happen is when SLPs get to an IEP meeting, this worksheet right here, can you see it? Speech language impairment worksheet? Yes, you can see it. All right, this will need to be attached. So we're going to be asking, is there a significant discrepancy from typical communication? In which area? We have to rule out limited English proficiency or rule it in as a contributing factor, adverse effect, and need for specially designed instruction. So to help guide us is this, okay? The speech production assessment summary. And what you'll see here, and where it's a little bit different from Virginia, is I added the Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, and 4. So stimulability is what speaks to the need for specially designed instruction. So what you're going to see is what we're looking for is if they fall in this moderate to substantial impact. So the need for specially designed instruction will be if error sounds are 50 to 59% stimulable. So again, that's why we have that probe. The severity is going to be based on the percentage of. So if they have a PC 50 to 84%, that determines the severity. The academics, this will go back to the teacher information, which I'll scroll up to, as well as the intelligibility piece. So those will be that look at the adverse impact, and then as well as the phonological awareness probe because of its tie with the literacy piece. But again, that's a language or speech language piece, so I kept that under speech sound awareness and production. And then this is either the speech based on the RTIC and or the Goldman-Fristow or the CAP or whatever, and the phonological processes. So now let me scroll up. So ultimately, this is where we're going. That's what I wanted to show you first, was where are we going with this? So when we're looking at referrals, what we need to look at is there's two questions we need to answer. Number one, is it that the teacher needs some help with the student in the classroom, which really translates to general education interventions? Just looking for some help, or is there suspicion of a disability? Because that's basically your two tracks. Okay, you can go one way or the other. So it's going to start with the communication referral. So that's where it starts. And I tried to lay it out as clear as possible. So as I go through it, just let me know what are the questions as I go through it. So the communication referral, this is K through 5th. Now, of course, there's a 6th through 12th, but this one is K through 5th, which is where we get, I would dare say, the vast majority of referrals. First, we need to look at limited English proficiency. If nothing else, that's going to tell us where do we need to go with our assessment. Then, in comparison to peers, I almost want to bold this and put this in like 16 font because that's what we really need to compare it against. But essentially, if the teacher puts never, if everything is checked in the never column, we're good. We don't need to do anything. But this is helping to guide the teacher's thinking in terms of what is the struggle. What are we really looking for? If they're checking sometimes and always, that kicks it over to our observation. All right, any questions so far? A response? Okay, so that gets us to the observation. Now, if you'll recall, one of the things that we talked about is we very much want to get away from using the term screening. Because what tends to happen with screening is we tend to use screening as eligibility. So essentially what happens is we'll screen a child and then essentially a speech language pathologist will say yay or nay, they need to go to an evaluation. If we're saying no, then we have essentially given them an eligibility determination to say they're fine. So we really need to get away from using the term screening and go towards more observation. The other thing with observation, as I hope I mentioned before, is you don't need permission to do an observation. You're basically coming into the classroom to say, hey, this teacher has concerns. I have an expertise. I have an expert ear. I'll come and see what I think, and I will give you some input. So again, it's asking limited English proficiency, and this is really critical. So I'm going to highlight this here in yellow. Okay, the referral concerns. We want to narrow down what the referral concerns are based on what we saw on the teacher referral, because we do not want to look at other areas that aren't an area of concern. Of course, we want to look comprehensively, but you and I all know if we look at some aspects of language, you're going to find it. You're going to find a kid who is using poor present progressives, or you might hear, they use some sentence fillers and things like that for vocabulary. But what we really want to do is we very much want to make sure we're addressing specifically what the referral concerns are. Now, in Virginia, their observation is very broad. It's a blank sheet of paper. It's so broad. My feeling is that when we're going in for an observation, there are certain things that we need to be looking at. So if nothing else, these different things on here, the articulation, and this is broken down by those new developmental norms. Okay, which one is where? We need to be listening for certain things so that we can then know whether or not what area needs to be addressed within the MTSS meeting, especially if we're looking at going the evaluation route, if we suspect a disability. Now, the other piece is, because this really starts in general ed, we need to know if the teacher was doing any strategies, what interventions they were using, and then we need to check off which ones we have observed. Any questions on that? And then I'll finish this form. Appropriate pause given. Okay, so then the final thing that we need to look at is number one. For us, in our observation, was the student's communication? Remember, that's going back to adverse effect, which we talked about on that form. Second thing we need to answer is, do we suspect a disability? Yes or no? And then we need to determine, okay, either we are going to give the teacher some interventions they can and should try, or we suspect a disability and they likely need to go to MTSS. Or, you know what? This kid was A-okay, we're good. All right, any questions on the observation form as a whole? Okay, appropriate pause given. All right, so now let's scroll down. So now let's say we've gone to MTSS. We've gone to MTSS and we have shared what we have observed. If the team decides that the student, then as part of the assessment, this needs to be filled out by the teacher. Educational assessment of communication skills. This is where we're getting very down in the nitty-gritty of the adverse impact. It's not just based on grades, but what are the grades? How did they do on the standardized scores? MAP, ITBS, COGAT, SE Ready. If you have their information from their dyslexia screening, put that in there. Any of those kinds of standardized state mandated kind of tests, that goes there. Again, this is the teacher to fill out. This is the teachers. Then they also have to answer the question of in comparison to peers. Again, we're looking at adverse educational impact. If they're not different from their peers, then there's no adverse educational impact. So specific to reading and spelling, because again, there's such a connection between speech, language, and literacy. when we're looking at average, above average, below average, well below average, if they're below or well below, we need to know what is the student's reading level and what are the peers at, like what's expected of them. All right, then other aspects of the day. Is there other areas of struggle? And again, that goes back to that. Goes back to this column. Okay, goes back to all of that. So that is the teacher's piece. Sorry, I went too far. Any questions on the teacher's piece? So they answer these questions. This one is a big one, the intelligibility. That also ties with one of the questions in the summary form. They have a more of an extended response. Also, you'll note here, parents' concern. Hopefully that should have been gathered from the MTSS meeting. Now, from the parent in the meeting, ideally, you want to get from the parent this rating of intelligibility. So how well do you understand them? And so on and so forth. This one is a great one. This was a research-based one, which I had not seen before. It's pretty cool. So parent rating of intelligibility, and then any other observations. So this gives us good data, again, looking at adverse impact. Now, here's where we get into our speech part. What is the speech language pathologist doing? So the first one is a phonological awareness probe. Now, I'm going to pause here and talk about this for a minute. Now, one of the questions has been, why not use a CTOP, or why not use the PALS, or why not use something else? What we're looking at is we're not looking for a standard score. We're not looking for a standard score on the GFTA either. We're looking at where do they fall in the developmental continuum. And what tends to happen with a phonological awareness assessment, standardized assessment, it gets boiled down to basically to an average score. And in terms of the impact on literacy, this is what makes a difference. This advanced phonological awareness skills. So on the CTOP, this refers to a skill called elision. What may happen is their overall standard score may show that they're fine, but they may be pitiful at elision. And then that's what contributes to the difficulty with literacy. So all you have to do for the phonological awareness probe is just ask them a few of these things. How many words do you hear in this? And just check off where they are. And then too, you know exactly which skills are weak. So if you do find a weakness, you know exactly what goal to write and then what the next set of goals should be in the future. All right, questions on the phonological awareness probe. And somebody actually sent me some great feedback, so I updated it a little bit. So if you are using the one I sent first, I actually updated a little bit of this based on some feedback already. Any questions on the phonological awareness probe? Okay, so far so good. How about somebody just say hey? Oh wait, there's Tanya. Okay, so I know y'all are still alive. Okay. All right, so next will be the stimulability probe. Again, the very important things which I felt like bolding at least at first or highlighting is only the sounds that are absent from your inventory are tested. So you're not looking at every single phoneme. Let's say if it's just an S, you only test S all the way across. If it's R, you test R all the way across. Okay, and if there's multiple, you still only test those two. Or what it's saying here is you can only do one of the vowels. So again, here's the citation again. So we know that this is evidence-based. This is good information. Let me unbold this before I leave it that way. So stimulability is looking at the need for specialized services. Any questions on the need for specialized services and the stimulability probe? Appropriate wait time. Okay. Next is the imitative sentence percentage consonants correct. Again, this is going to be your severity. How do we determine severity? So again, you're going to have them just imitate these sentences back. And again, the directions are pretty clear on here exactly what to do. But again, the whole purpose of this is severity. All right. Now this I put in, this is not part of the Virginia stuff, but I felt like this helped me frame my thinking. Oh, wait, I forgot to ask, is there any questions on the percentage of consonants correct? Any questions there?
Hey, Angie, it's Michelle Jordan.
Hi, Michelle.
I don't have a question so much as we've used this before. I recommend it for my current district and in my previous district. I see Sherry's here. But when I've used the percent consonants correct before, I've done it so, say, the words from the Goldman Fristo at the word level. I like this because it's, at the sentence level, connected speech. But if we were to use it from information we already have, whether we pulled it from a single word assessment or maybe a language sample we already have, is that appropriate, or do you think would those results be similar to if we did it with a sentence? I look at it and I think it's great, but I wonder if some SLPs be like, wow, that's a lot of sentences to give on top of everything else. Could we use data we already have to determine this?
This is what I would appreciate from a trial run. Actually, I would love to have someone do it both ways and see if there's a difference. So if your people are game for that, I would love that data, because if we can use something else that's already part of the GFA or whatever else, if we can use that, awesome. Are you game for that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Moving on. Okay, so back to reframing sort of my thought. Oh, also before I go on, I really because I know this is a quick turnaround, what I really want to impress upon you is you don't have to do this trial run starting from the teacher referral. You could start just from the evaluation process. Any piece of this that you can give, either the pre-referral or actually once you've identified you suspect a disability, any little bit of this that can be completed gives good information. So I'll take anything. I'll take any portion of it. All right, so scrolling down. So I created this worksheet because I felt like, at least initially, this helps frame what we're doing and the purpose of it. So what you see here is the purpose of prong 1, determination of impairment. So we're looking at the oral peripheral, a space for notes. There's information here about if you've got cleft, which I have seen. I don't know if I've already told anybody this horror story. I had a student that was in preschool, had moved from New York, and had an unrepaired cleft right down the middle. Yeah, so I saw that. It was shocking, and I felt like I was in a third world country, but it happens. It definitely happens. So just keep that in mind. So prong 1, these are all the things that we're looking at, 1 through 4, to answer prong 1. Okay, so you'll notice there's a place to put the standard score or percentile, and then I've got a note here of what that eligibility is, but really what we're looking for is that norms of acquisition. And then here's a noted exception. So this lateralized sibilance, usually there's no self-correction with that. There is literature to support not using developmental norms when looking at laterals. I love an R, but I struggle with a lateral, that's for sure. But in order to determine prong 1, we need to complete 1 through 4. And if we're suspecting phonological processes, then when we do this one, we look at that. All right, for prong 2, here's all the things we need to look at. Okay, we're looking at the academic concerns documented by that educational assessment of communication skills. That's what EAS stands for. That first teacher worksheet, or the second teacher worksheet, not the referral, but once we have identified there's a disability, we need this information from this teacher, and we need to document what are the areas of concern. Do you have to document 4 areas of concern? Absolutely not, but there's a space for it. Maybe, and you can give me feedback on it, maybe it's better just to have a place for it. What are the academic concerns? We are also including the educational impact as it relates to phonological awareness. Okay, where are they as it relates to their age norm? We're also looking at intelligibility. So we have the parent score. We have a place on that teacher rating that's on that EACS. We have a place for the teacher to put that, and then we also have the SLP. So we're looking at it not just does the parent or teacher struggle within all the noise of the classroom, but also what does the parent say, and then what do you hear? And then finally, we're using that stimulability probe to look at the need for specially designed instruction. And then, do we have any additional information? So, for example, did this child have a cleft? Does this child have like a palatal expander? What interventions have been tried before? A whole host of different things. Now, this is optional, the speech sound worksheet. But again, I think at least at first, it will be helpful to frame our thinking around the 3 prongs of eligibility. Any questions on the worksheet? Again, it's optional, but I think it's very helpful for framing our thought process.
Angie?
Yes.
I just see a typo on the
good.
worksheet, number 3, norms for acquisition. I assume you mean sounds that do not meet norms for acquisition. Just says do not norms.
Under 3.
Oh no, under it's prong 1, number 3.
Prong 1, 3. Oh. Okay, thank you. Okay. Now what I will do, because again, somebody pointed out some things to tweak on the phonological awareness probe, I will resend this packet. So again, if y'all see something else, let me know. So, and again, it's got the criteria here. So must demonstrate three sounds and or greater than 3 sounds that do not meet norms for acquisition. Thank you. Okay, back to the worksheet. Any questions about the worksheet? Oh, sorry. I was on. Yeah, the worksheet. Now we're going to talk about the assessment summary.
Angie, hold on, it's me again.
Okay.
Can we go? I have one more question about the norms for acquisition. So that means a kid with just an R, we're not going to be seeing those anymore? Or, I mean, because if you've got to have 3 sounds, are you thinking about positions?
Well, and this is sort of what I was talking about before. So, and I was talking with the researcher about this. So what's not included in here is the vowel controlled R. So in some tests, like the Goldman-Fristow, R is more than one error. So in initial position, it's an error. Medial position, it's an error. And I want to say the new Goldman-Fristow also includes the vowel controlled as an error. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So you're thinking about the different positions here. Wonder if we need to clarify that.
I like that. All right. So would you say R, especially R in different positions, or if it's consistent across all positions, which way do you think would make the most sense? Because personally, I would prefer looking at all of the vowel controlled R's, but they don't have the research on that, so it's hard for me to say. But I definitely, it would be interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some feedback from the others.
Yeah. So the question I think that's on the table is if it's an R only, and we're asking for they have to have 3 or greater sounds in error, do we include the different positions?
Yeah, or it could be an L only. It could be any of these.
Or S only, yeah.
Or an S only.
All right, so feedback from the group.
How did you come up with has to be equal to or greater than 3 sounds?
The Virginia eligibility.
Do you know their reasoning for that? Was it somehow correlated to a standard score, or they just felt like 3 was the magic number?
I will ask her and let y'all know. How about that? Because it does, to me, 3 or greater would be more of a substantial impact than a moderate impact.
Right, because if you're looking at a kiddo with an R, I mean, it could not only be the beginning, the middle, and those vocalic R's. There are blends. They might have difficulty with that. So I think that should be considered as an error as well.
I will email her today. She's pretty good about getting back in touch pretty quick. And I'll ask her and I will let y'all know. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Okay. Appropriate wait time given. And then finally, we get to this. Again, ideally, I would turn this in because you can essentially circle all the way across where they fall. But I think it makes it very clear to the team why you're picking someone up or why you aren't picking someone up. Because it's very, very clear. So I can let y'all play with that and see if you prefer to include that or only include this. But I personally, I would take this to the meeting to show why I am answering these questions that way. Okay. What other questions do you have?
I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to jump off now, but I look forward to watching the rest of it on video. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Now we are down to 5, including me. So y'all turn your camera on. Say hey. Hi, Tanya. Hi, Christine.
Hi.
Hi, Michelle. Hi,
Hey.
Lynn. Okay, so what questions do you guys have? Or what do you anticipate from your staff who are trialing it?
Angie, it's Chris. I just wanted to comment and say I'm so glad that this is coming out and we're going to be trialing this and rolling this out. I did something similar to this in another state, and looping back to with the sounds and the sound errors, what we did is we treated, it wasn't all the positions of the sounds. We didn't count that as each individual error. It was just the actual sound itself.
Okay.
So if it
Did
was
you-
a K, you had to have more than 3 sounds in error, period. But you could have it in initial, medial, and final, and that was still just one error.
Okay. So did you find that this tended to qualify more kids or less kids, or how did you see it play
What
out?
we did is for those, it kind of slowed the process down a little bit, and it really clarified and brought into perspective what we did and made life easier communicating with our MTSS or RTI teams. And it also allowed better understanding across the board, because what would then happen is we would provide articulation lab or sound lab, some sort of intervention, and we devoted so many hours of that. And then after we took attendance and did that, if the child still was not making necessary progress at the end of that time, then we would refer.
Okay.
So it didn't, I just felt that it was extremely helpful, and it gave everyone just what to do. And there was no question of what comes next. And everybody, even if you had a new SAT or RTI chairperson, it just helped out immensely because everybody understood the expectation.
Okay. Thank you. That's good to know. And it's awesome that you've already done it. And so you have that perspective. All right. Anybody else?
One thing that I was thinking about, Angie, that just occurred to me when we're thinking about 3 or more sounds in error, we're not really, I know we're looking at phonological awareness, but not the phonology part necessarily. So if a child was, say, fronting K and G, that's only 2 sounds, but because of the phonological process, I would consider that more severe. Because it's a process, it's not a typical development. So we don't really account for that anywhere, it looks like. I could be overlooking something.
I think you will see that on this summary right here. Can y'all still see the paper? So moderate would be that velar fronting, consonant cluster reduction, syllable, one or more. So it is definitely including that in there.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully that, so it sounds like if you have, let's say you have a K and G kid and maybe they have L, they would, well, if they have L and they're phonological, they're likely going to have R. But let's just say they have K and G. So they wouldn't necessarily qualify.
But you've got Velar for moderate, so that could they have some things that would be minimal, some that would be moderate, and then you'd have to look at the things that are moderate or minimal or
Right, and-
substantial to determine.
Yes, and then look at the educational piece and then look at the stimulability and percentage of consonants correct. So I think you could have a not all the way across kid, you could have a up and down kind of a kid. And then you, again, I would think you would then determine which is the critical pieces here. Are there more reasons to say it's moderate or not?
Yeah, as a team decision, sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. So essentially, and that's a great point. Essentially, we're trying to present as clear of a picture to the team, as clear as possible, what is an educational speech sound disorder, which meets those 3 prongs. Sound good?
Makes sense.
All right, well, I will email Marie, but I appreciate Christine's perspective on that. But I'll email Marie Ireland just to follow up on that question. But otherwise, please continue to email me anytime you have questions. I will resend the packet with the errors corrected. I think that was you, Michelle, wasn't it? That sent me the
Yeah.
phonological. Yeah.
It was.
Okay. And we will go from there. And again, beggars can't be choosers. So any piece you can do is great.
I have, I think, maybe 8 therapists who have agreed to 8 to 10, and they're in various stages. Some are awaiting a referral, and others are already started. I said, start where you are and just do what you can. So
Okay.
hopefully we'll have information soon.
Yes. All right. Anything else from the group? Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for your efforts to work on this so that we can at least have said we've given it a shot and here's where we can troubleshoot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.